Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to Wild, Weird, and a little rambling thoughts about Lughnasadh. It's near the end of July. I am on the unceded ancestral traditional territory of the White peoples in Canada, and we are in the middle of the heat wave in the end of July of 2022. And so we are coming up to Lughnasadh, which a lot of us, not everyone, take for being the first harvest. So, given that you're hanging out here at an abysmal perspective channel, this is my. I'm presuming you already know things about Wicca, paganism, etc., and I don't really have to go into the basics particularly. My other channel, A Witch's Perspective, is more for that kind of. You don't need any context to understand me over there. Over here, a little bit of context probably helps. So, going into it, I wanted to explore for my own thoughts, my own ritual, and my shared ritual for people about first harvest. What are we looking at in the season? What does this all mean? And I'm not going to go into the naming of Lughnasadh and where that comes from. I am going to start with, I think, a little of the just idea of the season for me. So I'm very much that the fire festivals are the points of transition where we see one season falling and another season rising. And I do live in a temperate zone, so it is very much, we have 4 seasons and the transitions between the 4 are very clear-ish, as much as seasons can get clear. So for me, the solar festivals are more the seasons going, hey, look at me, I'm here, aren't I great, aren't I grand, I'm so present, and the fire festivals are transition points. And with that, I ascribe seasonally, as much as many of us do, of course, the elements to the seasons. But being me, I like to switch it up a little bit. And it's not so much about a need to switch it up as that I feel a need to work with things differently to really suit the here and now that we're living in. So for me, the autumn season, the fall, is the season of air. Air, in this case, not being about mind, but actually about our emotions, about our experiences. Death also relates very much for me with air and with the season. So, with saying that, it actually ties incredibly well into Lughnasadh as first harvest. Because when you think about it, a harvest is taking something that is in some form of growing life cycle. It is in a life cycle. It is living. It is changing. It is becoming. It is doing things. And when we harvest it, we take it from an existence that is undergoing change, and we stop it and we freeze it and we go, this is the end of its changing on its own nature. When we harvest, we are putting an end to its own development and going, okay, now we're going to take this. And, there's been really, for me today, I always reserve the right to change my mind. It's a perspective, and perspectives can change. Thank you very much. But today, the 3 main things I see for us getting out of harvest are nourishment, preservation, or preparation. What do I mean by this? So when we harvest something, and we're if you think about, normally we're thinking about plants, right? We're harvesting plants. We're harvesting the fruits of our labors. Getting the fruits off of the trees, the berries off of the bushes, the corn off the stalks. I could keep going. We could see it also as harvesting, animals, right? When we are butchering animals, we are in a sense harvesting there as well. And we can harvest moments from our own lives, our own experiences. And even there, again, it's taking something and completing it. In an interesting way with art, it's kind of when you're done with a piece of art, when it goes off as a gift or it moves into a form of presentation or a gift or into someone else's realm, it too has been harvested. It has ceased to be something that is changing and transforming, and is that transformation is done, it's finished, and it becomes static in a sense. So I said that the three things that we do typically with harvest, especially when we think of harvesting food. First is nourishment. Again, doesn't have to apply just to food. We always want to take these very real world, physical, almost romantic notions of how things were done in the long, long ago, and invite them to open up our ways of engaging with not just the natural world, but starting in the natural world, and then how does that reflect back? How does that cycle back into the rest of our worlds that are not as separate from the natural world as we like to present in our own heads? Because frankly, we are on one planet, it's natural, everything that we have comes from that planet, so there can be a lot of processing. Yes, it's still originated in the natural, probably a topic for another day. So nourishment, we take that which we've harvested so that we can take it straight into ourselves. In other words, we eat and we keep going. We need to eat. Well, we certainly like to eat multiple times on a daily basis, like multiple times a day or on a daily basis. We don't have to eat on a daily basis to literally survive, but we are not happy. Our bodies really do like to get food every day. So harvesting, the first step is just straight out nourishment. I'm going to take it right in. So that immediate satisfaction, gratification, need fulfilled. Number two is preservation. Okay, I ate what I needed today. So I was berry picking. I ate the berries. I put the berries in the bucket. I ate the berries, put the berries in the bucket. So the berries in the bucket, and this is really when we start to feel into harvesting. I really think this is where we lean to. We don't necessarily think of that immediate food gratification, but that preservation stage. We are preserving it so we can eat later, because food does not last. It's why we have fridges. It's why we have freezing. It's why you have salted items or a way to preserve. There's all of these ways. Canning, so much fun, so much heat. So the wrong time of year to be doing canning, and yet the only time of year to be doing canning. A horrible conundrum if you've ever canned. But these are ways of preserving the food that we can't eat right now. We don't need to eat right now for a time when we do need them. So preserving. And then preparation is the best word I can come up with in the moment. And that is particularly, it's not in every realm, but in certain cases, such as with grains and plants, we are keeping a portion of that harvest to plant again, to be able to prepare for the future and how we're going to use what we've harvested to start the cycle up again. Now, all of what I've been talking about has been very much of intentional, kind of that crop growing view of harvesting. But there's also wild harvesting, where you didn't plant the items and you're not going out into a field and doing this. You're going into a forest, perhaps, and acquiring things. And this is actually probably more topical for a lot of modern pagans, that we don't do a lot of farming and growing. Most of us are urban or suburban, so we may have a little bit of garden, but we don't have a farm situation for most of us going on. So a lot of what we gather is going to be wild gathered. And when we get into wild gathering, we actually get into a lot of very interesting territory that still comes down to well, there's two main points I want to bring up. The first, because the nourishment and the keeping it at length, whatever that middle word was, preserving, those kind of stay the same. But the preparation for the next year, this component is really critical. And this is a place I think we could invite a lot of reflection and engagement to improve our own relations with the planet, with our territory, with our homes, and to live better lives. And why do I say this? Because with the preparation, what we're really talking about is in order for that herb to come back the next year, in order for the tree to do well, in order to have that crop again the next year, we need to leave a certain amount behind. And it's not just the amount that is necessary for that plant to survive, it's enough that that plant can be harvested by all of the rest of the ecosystem that relies on it for nourishment as well, and still have enough left to survive. There are, I am undoubtedly certain, percentages that are encouraged for wild harvesting. I wouldn't be surprised if it's less than 10 or even less than 5% of the plant, because there is that need. It's not just you as individual. It's the humans wandering through, it's the animals wandering through, it's the whole, like I said, environment ecosystem, and how that plant is part of, is woven into that. And of course, we're probably not the only person. If I go through, I'm probably not the only one human who is doing the harvesting. And it's very easy for us to just go, ooh, there it be, I'd be taking that. That's the mindset that has placed us with the most remarkable heat wave. There's a band of red around the planet right now when I look at a heat map that just says, yeah, things have changed. We need to pivot in our approach. So this is an invitation to work with this season to start exploring your own approach and if and how you would be inclined to pivot based upon what can be learned. Because as we grew industrial and moved away from that strong agricultural dependency in the most immediate way, we lost a lot of those rhythms. And I think that's one of the reasons why paganism is so much of a draw for people, is that need and that desire to reconnect into those rhythms again. So that was one, is the really thinking about that preparation for the next year. How and what do you do? How do you leave the environment, the ecosystem, well off when you are done? And the second one is for all of us who are not on the lands of our ancestors. And we are on, and generally in this conversation, and given that I am in Canada, it is referred to as Indigenous land. I'm just acknowledging that if somebody is living in farther places where this phrasing is not as correct, that is my context, and that is what I'm working from. So, as I acknowledged at the beginning of the video, I am on Indigenous land of the Kakite peoples. And as someone, a friend of mine recently pointed out, after it was pointed out to her on a walk and workshop that she was at, that given that we are on ancestral, unceded, traditional territories belonging to others, that wildcrafting, those berries, those wild herbs are part of the cultural and ritual and spiritual life of other people first. I do not have first claim as a settler. I am largely grateful that I have a claim, and that this land does welcome me, and that that the Indigenous people who, my global ancestors robbed of life and liberty and home, do not fight to get me gone, but rather invite us into reconciliation, into healthier ways of engaging with each other. They do a much better job, honestly, of recognizing where we are and that we need to go forward from here. And as far as I'm concerned, it behooves us to do what we can to also to move there as well, to recognize where we are, to own our bad places, and to move into healthier ones. And part of that is recognizing that every berry on every bush does not belong to me, to you, to all of us. So yeah, it's not, I do not have first claim. Settlers do not have first claim, as it were. The land has first claim. The first peoples have first claim. Well, second claim, I guess you could say, which would put us at third. And that's okay. It's okay. right? It's a much more generous and sharing perspective. So there's all of that going on with the harvesting. And I'm going to now switch topics a little bit, still sticking to the harvest, but shifting into a different lens of it, which I alluded to earlier, but want to just draw it out a little bit more. And that's the death aspect of the harvest. So in my cosmology, in my worldview, zeitgeist, whatever you want to call it, when we hit kind of Beltane was like, death is no longer an issue. We are life, we are all life, we are all life all the time. And by the time you reach Litha, oh good lords, that is exactly where we're at. It is all life all the time. Summer, right? Everyone has that feeling about summer. Summer is this glorious place. And that's why I think for many, start of summer is Litha, is the summer solstice, which would put Lughnasadh as the middle of summer. And I get it. It is hot. Viewing summer as like this heat-driven, sunshiny place. Whew, yep, that is summer right now. Not how I choose to see the season. I'm following more of the light cycle in a way, right? Like the solar cycle with it, but also seasonally. So I see summer as that expansion and that growth, pure life. At the summer solstice at Litha, in that height of light, like longest day of the year, just as with Yule, shortest day of the year, longest night. In the longest night, there's that seed, right? The light's going to shift. So from the darkness, that seed of light is now, it's going to do its thing. In summer solstice, the opposite is also true. That seed of darkness, as if you will, as the oak king is like, I am the ruler of all of which I purvey. That the holly king is seated in that moment, not present per se, not in any way ascendant, but darkness, death. That seed exists always. It's very yin yang, right? At the height of the other, they're still at its core, its opposite. By Lughnasadh, for me at Lughnasadh, let me put it that way. For me at Lughnasadh, that seed sprouts. Death sprouts, right? Like there's a whole bunch of life. We're going to see, fruits, vegetables, things are going to keep growing and growing. Like growing is not done. So it's not summer done, we're finished. That's not what this is about. Summer continues, but fall is rising. Right? This is what I was talking about of the transition period that happens for me at the fire festivals, where we are kind of cusping from one to the other. And where I see it particularly in the sprouting of death and the rising of death. And we see from a purely the sun, less hours in the day, thanks be, because it's so hot right now. And the plants start to wither and die. It's too much. The heat is too much. Thank goodness there's less sun, because the heat that is trailing after that sun, so much. Those yards and lawns and all the lush greenness that happens. I do live in a rainforest. There is a lot of lush green for the most part. I will be now supplanted by brown, because those grasses are not going to survive the heat. So while the fruits, the vegetables, the results of the growth are coming to a completion, right? Like they're still growing, they're fructifying. A lot of the material around it is finishing, is dying. Dying is begun. And then it takes us right to the harvest part, right? Like what is more dying than harvesting? Harvesting is literally the taking of life. So as we view this festival as the first harvest, it is about the first taking of life. It is about the beginning of the death cycle. And for the most part, the life and death things, I don't know what I'm trying to do there with my hands, but they're doing the thing. They cross over. Most of the year, we have some portion of one with the other, just as with the yin yang symbol. There are points when it's almost completely one and not the other, but always they are in relationship with each other. So that's the last thing I really wanted to bring attention to with thoughts, my perspective, an abysmal perspective around Lughnasadh and that first harvest viewpoint, and how death really starts to play into that. Because from here we move um, into Mabon. Dark is like it's half and half. We're headed there. Autumn. Yep, we're in full swing. And then we go to Samhain, which I was raised as final harvest for Samhain. I mean, it's always very practical, but we are going through that, you know, the dying cycle, and then at Samhain, death, which we hover in death until Yule, which is almost the height of darkness. Well, not almost, it is the height of darkness, but it is the ending of the height of darkness, and that seed of light begins, and then the life rises. And hopefully, you're seeing that reflection of what I was talking about on the other side. That brings us to Beltane, and life with almost no death present is so rampant. We have that from Beltane to Litha, and then reflected again, Samhain to Yule. Those are my very many rambly thoughts. Actually, I don't think I rambled too badly today. I'm kind of impressed by that. So with that, thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. I hope that this has titillated your viewpoints and your thought processes, and maybe even a little emotional engagement on how you relate to this particular turning of the wheel. I'm going to leave you with that and the blessings of the weird and wild to my fellow seekers and journeyers. And now I just have to figure out what button I hit. Ah, found it. All right, take great care of yourself. If you're in the heat wave, drink lots of water, stay as cool as you can. Bless me.